up, guys? I'm back with another amp comparison, and this time we're going to listen to the JCM800 compared to my Silver Jubilee. 100 watts versus 50 watts. This is not a fair fight, but I thought it would be interesting to hear how these two, kind of like brothers in terms of their tone, how they compare directly with one another, where their differences are, where the similarities are, and kind of where I can take each one. The twist here is that the 800 has the HotMod V2 installed in there, and the extra gain switch and the bass boost switch are both disabled right now. And we will hear what it sounds like with both of those on. What you heard in the intro was the Jubilee on the crunch channel, I guess the normal channel, or I don't know what it technically is. It's not the high gain channel. And I feel like without the HotMod, it's very similar in terms of the gain structure between the two amps. And with the HotMod, it's just got a little extra spice in the gain on the 800 compared to the not high gain channel of the Jubilee. So I figured what we would do is we were going to hear this amp with the HotMod. We kick over to the lead channel. I've got the Klon that we can turn on to hear kind of what these things sound like boosted. And all of this switching is going to be happening thanks to Marcus at KHE for hooking me up with this amp switcher here. And amp number 1 is the 800. Amp number 2 is the Jubilee. So let's go ahead and get started here with the setup. In terms of the EQing, I have both amps EQ'd pretty much the same, which is based off of, I don't know how to pronounce the guy's name. It's EUGE or something like that. He's the guy with the 800, like the 800 that has like twice as much gain as every other JCM 800 on the planet. But anyways, I pulled his EQ settings from his JCM 800 metal with the SD1 video. So I'll put a screenshot of the EQ controls there, and I've kind of done my best to get both of these amps set the exact same way. Definitely does not sound like his amp, not in the least bit, but even with the HotMod installed. So let's go ahead and get started here. So that's what the EQ is like, and as you could hear, the Jubilee is a lot beefier and somewhat darker of a sound, and the 800 cuts much harder in the top end and definitely does not have anything going on in the low end. But the HotMod does have that bass boost switch, so we'll turn that on here in a second. And yeah, enough talk. Let's just get to playing some more. So the bass boost switch on the HotMod does increase the gain. It still doesn't have the rumble that the Jubilee has, and the depth control on the Jubilee is completely off. So this amp has a whole lot of low end that it can bring to the table, but again, it does not cut like this 800. So let me go ahead and bring up presence on this amp, and we'll see how it compares. Even though this did get a little bit of extra gain from the bass boost on the HotMod, we'll see where we are with this now. Let's get that gain cranked up a little bit more to try and compensate for the HotMod. Top end on the 800 is just ridiculous. right, let's go over to the lead channel. Back the gain down a little bit and see where we're at. I just realized I was adjusting this while I was on the 800. Maybe I should pay attention to where the switcher's at. Yeah, I just can't get enough low end out of this to compete with what this one does. On the other hand, the presence and the top end on this are almost tapped out, and as you can see here, the 800 it's not even trying with the top end. So very big difference with the voice in terms of the bass and the top end, just the natural quantity of each in each respective amp. Let me go ahead, let's hear the boost on both of these amps, kind of how they currently sit. 800 first. Let's go ahead and flip the gain switch on the HotMod to the on position, kind of see where we end up. It gets really fuzzy there. It does not like being all the way up. Let me back the gain back down a little bit on the Jubilee and hit it with the Klon to see where we end up compared to how this sounds with the HotMod gain engaged without the Klon, if that makes sense. So boost with the Jubilee and then boost off with the 800 to kind of see how these compare. I mean, this thing adds a ton of gain, so I'm willing to bet that there's going to be way more saturation than with how the Marshall is right now without the boost. So anyways, let's just hear all that. Taking the gain all the way down. Starts to lose some clarity once you get past 3 o'clock or around 3 o'clock there. I could probably turn, let me turn the bass boost off and see what that does. All right, bass boost is off, but the gain switch is still engaged. It's a lot cleaner right there. It's less gain, but it's a more pleasing structure to my ears. Okay, so to my ears in the room, like I said, this amp has way more beef in the low end and a more rolled off top end. It does also have just more natural gain available, and the ability to have a crunchish channel that can get pretty close to the structure of the gain that the JCM800 has by itself without the HotMod. Now, the JCM800, on the other hand, it obviously has so much more top end. It cuts extremely hard, but at the expense of very little low end. And even with the bass boost helping it out, it's still just not quite there in terms of kind of just how this amp can sound with the bass and the depth kind of relatively modest set. I mean, it's almost like this amp with the bass maxed out is kind of like how this amp is with the top end maxed out, in terms of this just needing all the help it can get with the low end, and this one needing lots of help in the top end to sort of like try and meet in the middle, if that makes any sense. I hope that was a big word salad right there, but in my head it kind of made sense. I don't know. The other really big elephant in the room here is where the master volumes on each of these amps are set. As you can see, it's not quiet. Like, this is still just hugely loud, but this one is almost all the way up. And it's because these two amps, the volumes operate very, very differently from one another. This one, it gets really loud really fast and just sort of thickens up maybe around right there. It doesn't get a whole lot louder past that. This one, on the other hand, it's a much more linear taper, but there's this weird bump in volume once you get to around here, and the sound just sort of opens up in a really cool way. So just in order to kind of get a similar decibel output from each of these amps, the Jubilee needs to be run extremely hard on the output master. And like I said, this thing, it kind of goes from nothing to all the thing with the volume. So yeah, just very different in terms of how the volume operates on each of these amps. All right, well, that was another cool comparison, and I really enjoyed this. I think the Jubilee handled itself extremely well and sort of hopefully gives you an idea of how these two amps compare, how they're different, how they're similar, things like that, and what kind of difference the HotMod can make in terms of helping achieve a little bit more gain out of the 800 to bring it up to where the Jubilee is. All right, guys, that is going to wrap up this comparison. I will have affiliate links to the actual Marshall Silver Jubilee and the 800 down in the video description, as well as a link to David's site, Legendary Tones, if you want to grab one of those HotMod units. And also, I will put a link to the KHE website so you can check out some of these fantastic amp switchers that really do just make a huge difference in terms of the facilitating easy switching for these fast, immediate comparisons. I don't have to do any editing whatsoever with all this. It's just bump, 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 bump. It's life-changing in the studio here. So anyways, I will see you guys in the next video. Take care. Bye.